Abraham Lincoln once said, and I paraphrase, "It's better to sit quiet and be thought a fool rather than speak and remove all doubt." Well, Donald Trump Jr. just opened his mouth, and guess what happened? Welcome to Occupy Democrats. I'm David Reddish. The past week has seen a radical change in the United States' relationship with Russia. Beginning in 2014, when Russia annexed part of the neighboring nation of Ukraine, the US had pushed sanctions against Russia and generally regarded it as a geopolitical adversary. That stance was also borne out by interference by Russia in the 2016 presidential election, designed to benefit, guess who? Donald Trump. During Trump's first term, he went out of his way to flatter Russian President Vladimir Putin, going so far as to say he believed Putin over American intelligence officials. And now Don Jr. is doing it again. More on that in a moment. Following another invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022, the United States and its allies in NATO pushed to admit Ukraine to join the treaty alliance and for Russia to withdraw. Both the US and European allies have sent Ukraine billions in foreign aid to resist the invasion and Russia's crimes against humanity. In case you haven't heard, that's a very long list that involves kidnapping, human trafficking, attacking medical facilities, and the list goes on. In other words, freedom lovers around the world stand against Russia. That changed last week when inebriated sperm bank and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said this.
The United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of a negotiated settlement. Instead, any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops. If these troops are deployed as peacekeepers to Ukraine at any point, they should be deployed as part of a non-NATO mission, and they should not be covered under Article 5. There also must be robust international oversight of the line of contact. To be clear, as part of any security guarantee, there will not be U.S. troops deployed to Ukraine.
Earlier this week, Donald Trump doubled down on Hegseth's remarks, saying this.
And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. What he was so bad.
Yes, it seems like the U.S. has decided to ally itself with the world's biggest bully. Earlier this week at the UN, the U.S. voted alongside Russia, North Korea, and Iran not to condemn the invasion of Ukraine. In Saudi Arabia last week, representatives from the U.S. and Russia met to discuss Ukraine's future and an end to the war without Ukraine present. The Trump administration has attracted bipartisan criticism for its handling of Russia, Ukraine, and negotiations to end the war. That hasn't deterred Trump, who, for some reason, sees Vladimir Putin as a friend. Then, yesterday, Nepo baby Donald Trump Jr. doubled down on Trump's vision of a world where the U.S. and Russia act together as a gang of schoolyard thugs. Speaking on his podcast, why does this man need a podcast? Who cares what he thinks? Speaking on his podcast, Don Jr. said this.
But they forget that Ukraine isn't the kind of country you go all in on. This is ridiculous.
I honestly can't imagine anyone in their right mind picking Ukraine as an ally when Russia is the other option. I mean, just think about it. Massive nuclear power loaded with natural resources everyone needs, literally the biggest country on the planet. And there's Ukraine, which has Chernobyl and some radiation-proof dogs.
Yeah,
Meanwhile, the Biden administration is like, oh yeah, this is definitely the ally we need. Let's dump all our money into them. Honestly, if anything, the U.S. should have been sending weapons to Russia.
Okay, so let's break this down. Yes, Russia is a huge country. It has nuclear power, but that's not unusual. Tiny nations, the UK, Israel, they have no shortage of nuclear warheads either. And as for those natural resources, the whole reason Russia invaded Ukraine was to get Ukraine's natural resources. Referred to as the breadbasket of Europe, nations have fought over that territory for 1,000 years. It has fertile soil, it's ideal for growing crops. It has rich oil and natural gas fields, rare earth minerals, and more. It makes sense for the US to ally itself with Ukraine so the United States can get those resources. Ukraine is a tiny country and can't use them all. Oh, and Chernobyl? That was installed in Ukraine by Russia during the Soviet era, which, once again, speaks to Don Jr.'s stupidity, ignorance, or both. Then there's the whole principle of, promoting American-style democracy worldwide, not the autocratic corruption and thuggery of Vladimir Putin. But as we all know, Don Jr. likes to see himself as a thug and sees corruption as an asset. This is what happens when you grow up in a crime family. The truly sad and frightening thing here isn't that Don Jr. doesn't know what he's talking about. He never does. The sad thing is that he shows more allegiance to the values of a corrupt dictator than he does to the United States. Donald Trump Jr. is an anti-patriot. He is someone that hates American liberal democracy, free society, and peaceful diplomacy. Like his father, he aspires to be a crook. And given Donald Trump's chaotic first month in office, I'm willing to say he's no different. Donald Trump hates America, and at this point, only someone living in a cave on Mars could say otherwise. And this is the man currently occupying the hallowed ground of the White House. The United States has had flawed presidents before. It's had criminal presidents before, let's be real. But it's never had one so ready to sell out American interests and the American people to a foreign adversary. If Make America Great Again means making the US look more like Russia, a nation where the unemployment and corruption run rampant, where infrastructure and technology crumble, and where free thought and human rights are treated as enemies, well, I'll say this much. I hope the MAGA crowd really likes borscht. This is Occupy Democrats.